I'm Jeff DeBelko of the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington, but I'm in Oslo, Norway for the Global Environmental Change and Human Security Conference. I'm with David Jensen, who's the Policy and Planning Coordinator for the Post-Conflict and Disaster Management Branch of the UN Environment Program based in Geneva. So David, you've been working in post-conflict settings, assessing environment, working from that to build capacity, identify hotspots, and even go the further step of developing institutions to try to build trust, confidence, and peace around environment in these settings. From your work in the field, can you tell us a little bit about lessons learned and how you are integrating research, but also communicating what you're finding in your assessments in those field-based settings?
Sure, Jeff. I would love to talk about some of our lessons. I guess the first thing is, although I work for the UN Environment Program, and we do post-conflict environmental assessments, we almost never use the word environment in the work we do, in the advocacy work. We find environment as a word, as a term, has very little meaning these days to a non-technical audience or to the unconverted. They often associate the term with pollution or with climate change or with conservation, but they don't understand the breadth of what we mean when we say the term. So I would say that the first lesson is don't use the term environment, but really break it down into what you mean. Typically we now use natural resources and environment. We sort of tack it on at the end, but we start with natural resources. Then we usually take it a step further in terms of what are the resources we're actually talking about. Usually it's water, usually it's land, forestry, minerals, oil, but we try and be very, very specific and not rely on generalities in terms of the environment. What we found, if you do use environment, what I found in particular in Congo, in both Congo and Afghanistan, I arrived, I used the term environment, and I was immediately invited to the zoo. Come look at our animals. Okay. So there's this legacy of the term that we no longer, that really affects what we do, so we no longer use it. I'd say the second thing we do to be effective in communicating, let's say, environmental needs, is that we always understand very specifically our audience and the language that they use in their field. So, for example, if we're dealing with peace builders, we're looking at terminology like governance, like security, like reconciliation, and how natural resources support each of those sectors. So understand your audience and use the language that they use to make your argument. If we're talking about peacekeepers, we're looking at security of compounds, we're looking at vulnerability of supply lines, and how better resource management can contribute to both. So it's really understand your audience and frame your arguments according to their lexicon. I'd say the third thing we do more and more these days is we don't do the doom and gloom scenarios anymore. We do a bit of doom and gloom, a little bit of it, but more importantly, we focus on the opportunities provided by resource management and the sustainable management of resources. So we focus much more on how they can support economic recovery, how they support livelihoods, how environment can be a platform for cooperation, rather than only on the negative side. I would say that the fourth thing we try to do, environment is a very complex topic, as I already mentioned. We try to find entry points using specific hotspots or specific sites that people can really understand and see the linkage between environment and conflict, or between their livelihoods and natural resources. So we try and find hotspots where we can focus public attention and sort of rally political will around them. I'd say that, what are we on now, 5? One of the things we always try to do if we do go into a post-conflict country and we do try and build up capacity in terms of laws and institutions and people, we always try to mix that with field-level interventions. We never just have the policy side and the legal side. We always try to be in the field and demonstrate the value of better resource management. So it's a mix of policy and field-level work. I think that's probably a good summary of what we try and do and how we try and communicate environmental needs to audiences that are not, let's say, accustomed to thinking in those terms.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.